You want me to put that on my todger?
Harry's wife. I'm not paying. You will have learned in immediate parts past him about Harry's latest court defeat, where the High Court said, no, we're not giving you permission for a judicial review based upon the second limb of your case. So a defeat for him. Of course, he got through on one limb, so the judicial review can take place with regard to that reason, but he lost on the second. Naturally, any litigation involves considerable fees. You're invariably going to hire a law firm, which will have a solicitor doing the donkey work with a partner overseeing and breezing into particular meetings and going wow, 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 charging you north of £750 an hour, north of £1,000 an hour. And then there'll probably be an associate involved as well. So you'll have at least 3 lawyers from the law firm running around. And then, of course, counsel is instructed. And you may well have a junior being led by a KC, a Silk, all with their own hourly rates on top. So invariably, with high-profile work such as this, although there isn't a huge amount of paperwork involved, there's not masses of disclosure, etc., what you're going to be facing is at least 5 lawyers' hourly rates being dumped on your file. Thus, it's expensive. And of course, that also means that your opponent is going to be incurring legal costs. Now, it's not necessarily the case that a government is going to incur the same level of legal cost as that as a well-off individual such as Harry, but legal fees, as you all know, aren't exactly cheap. You're paying for expertise. And therefore, Harry has to bear his own costs, of course, though if he succeeded, he would have wanted them paid by his opponent. But it is the usual order of events in the United Kingdom that costs follow the event, meaning if you win, your opponent pays a proportion of your costs. It's rare, indeed, to have all of your costs covered. Usually your opponent pays something to 60 to 70% of your costs, being my own experience in the various pieces of litigation that I've been involved in over the years. And of course, if you lose, you end up paying 60 to 70% of your opponent's costs, sometimes more if the judge orders a different basis of assessment, particularly where he regards you as having been engaging in particular misconduct. Thus, accordingly, Harry's lost, which means he bears his own costs and he should pay the costs of the government. But according to The Sun, Harry doesn't want to. Matt Wilkinson reports that Prince Harry's failed bid to pay for his own armed police has cost taxpayers more than £300,000 so far. His move for a judicial review was rejected by the High Court, which ruled armed Met police officers are not bodyguards for the wealthy. Harry wanted the review following a rejection of his offer to pay for his own protection in the United Kingdom after his security arrangements changed when he stopped being a working royal. But in his judgment released, Justice Chamberlain threw the case out after rejecting all of the Duke of Sussex arguments. The Met Police had argued in court that the decision to remove security was made in the public interest and warned if they were forced to give Harry 38 armed officers, it would divert resources from VIPs deemed to be at higher risk. During the hearing last Tuesday, the Met said it would be wrong to place officers in harm's way and would set a precedent for anyone prepared to cough up enough cash. Reacting to the High Court's refusal, a government spokesman said, "We welcome the judgment upholding the integrity of the protective security system." I'm pleased to note that the Super Soraway Sun knows how to spell judgment when it's a legal one, compared to the Telegraph yesterday. The UK government's protective security system is rigorous and proportionate. It is our long-standing policy not to provide detailed information on those arrangements, as doing so could compromise their integrity and affect individual security. It would not be appropriate to comment further on the legal proceedings. The Duke of Sussex's lengthy court bids have already cost Brits a small fortune. Figures revealed in a Freedom of Information request show taxpayers have so far footed a bill of £199,978.52 on government legal department costs, £93,268 on general counsel, £660 for court fees, £2,958 on email disclosure, and £16.55 for a courier. So the government have paid out those costs, and of course they ought to have those costs, or a proportion of them, paid by Harry. But it's stated that Harry's lawyers plan to challenge an application for him to pay the government's cost, which of course is ridiculous. Because on the one hand he's saying, well, I could afford to pay £6 million in security, but I can't afford to pay 400,000 with regard to, or 300,000, or a contribution thereto to those costs. It isn't actually about saying, I can't afford it, because he clearly can. He clearly can because he's wealthy. He clearly can because if he can claim to be able to pay for security, then he could fork out these legal fees. The reason is he doesn't want to pay. Why? Because his wife tells him to. Now you might think, HG, how could you possibly know that? It's very simple. That money is Harry's wife's money. All their money is Harry's wife's money because of her sense of entitlement and lack of boundary recognition. Accordingly, when Harry takes action where he wins in court, it's her win because of the fact that he's an extension of her. But where he loses, that's his loss. And as I mentioned yesterday in his court defeat, she'll use that against him. But moreover, where it's ordinarily the event that he has to foot his own legal bill and pay a proportion of the government costs, that does not sit well with Harry's wife because it's her money. And she's greedy. Money is a residual benefit. It's very important to Harry's wife because it enables her subconsciously to assert control over the people and draw fuel from them. It allows her to buy those expensive goods that she can then triangulate people with and utilise to form part of her facade of success. Remember, she's an unremarkable individual, and being able to portray an image of success is hugely important to her via her narcissism. Diminishing that success by having to part with money is a threat to her control. And therefore, Harry is instructed, don't you pay that money. And therefore, he embarks upon what must only be a doomed application to suggest, no, I'm not going to pay the government's costs, which will do what? He'll incur more costs in making that application, incur more costs on the government in fighting that application, and then ultimately will increase his cost bill. The behaviour of an idiot. Now, we know that he's dim-witted, but what's driving him is his wife's hand up his backside, puppeteering him, saying, you mustn't pay this money. And therefore, as the collateral consequences, causes Harry to incur yet more expenditure in trying not to incur expenditure in the first place. A very obvious collateral consequence of the behaviour of the narcissist seeking to assert control over Harry to nullify a threat to control posed by the order that he must pay costs, because she sees that as her money. Accordingly, it's not a case of not being able to pay. It's simply, I don't want to pay because my wife tells me we shouldn't. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.